This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1726, introducing Captain Marvel Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel Genis-Vell, and Captain Marvel Carol Danvers. I'm Ian Leatherstein.
I'm Chris Eberly.
And I'm Adam Murdoch.
Woo-ha!
Got you all in check, yo.
Well done, Murd. Well done. All right.
Gentlemen, a pleasure to hear both your voices on this wintry evening.
Same here. Same here.
And I want to tell. Go ahead, Ian. I'm sorry. My apologies.
And I wanted to say on a fruitful day, the official 14th anniversary of Comic Geek Speak.
Propitious indeed.
Oh wow, that's right.
Yep. Had it show up on my Facebook memories today that 4 years ago today we were at the former location of Golden Eagle Comics, recording the 10th anniversary episode. So, yep, here's to 14 years of marvelous podcasting.
Thank you, brother. That was a clutch moment of nostalgia on your part, and thanks for remembering the date. God, that 10-year event was already 4 years ago. Wow.
I know. Time flies. Time flies, and it's making me feel old.
That was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was.
Well, I wanted to tell the listeners that this topical episode just in time for the forthcoming Captain Marvel film, which we'll be reviewing shortly after it debuts, is all Mr. Levinstein's idea. And we're Murd and I are thrilled to pieces to be taking this, perambulating down memory lane here with some vintage Marvel comics. I'm especially excited to discuss the Monica Rambeau issue. I'd almost forgotten the sheer majesty of Roger Stern. So, looking forward to that.
Agreed indeed on all counts, Chris, particularly the excellence of the idea that Ian proposed here.
Indeed.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It literally came to me right as we were done recording a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, oh my God, there have been a lot of Captain Marvels, and at least one of them is about to have a movie, and it would certainly make sense to know a little bit more of the backstory of the name outside of the Captain Marvel spotlight from a few years ago you guys did on the original.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that. Thank you, Ian, because when we did that, we just focused on Mar-Vell, and that was part of a larger spotlight. We also did Silver Surfer and Adam Warlock in that episode. There's a cosmic-themed episode. So
it's episode 1636 for those interested in giving it a look.
Oh, Murd. Fantastic.
Excellent.
So I'm glad we're going to spend some time on all these other, magnificent iterations of the Captain Marvel title in the Marvel universe, rather than I always want to talk about the Captain Marvel of the Fawcett universe / DC universe.
And there will be more conversation on that subject forthcoming.
Excellent. I was trying to think, is it Captain's Marvel or Captain Marvels?
I'm inclined to say Captain's Marvel, just treating the Marvel as like a post-positive adjective, modifying the plural noun captain.
Nice.
Plus, I'm thinking of Captain's Courageous. So if it's Captain's Courageous, it's probably also Captain's Marvel.
Good point.
Well, Ian, this is your baby. Who'd you want to start with?
We might as well start at the beginning because that's a very good place to start. So, how about we go Monica Rambeau first?
All right.
Okay.
I'll be maintaining a respectful silence during this part of the program because I'm afraid I was unable to locate my copy of Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16. It's somewhere in my massive 15-year to-be-read pile. I have no idea which stratum to check. And I wasn't able to figure out that newfangled Marvel Unlimited thing that Ian keeps talking about.
Drats.
Despite his kindly volunteering his access code, I wasn't able to locate the issue. So take it away, guys. I'll just be bending my ear in respectful silence.
Well, Murd, to commiserate, because I've been using Marvel Unlimited quite a bit, actually, the past few months. And the first time around, it's not always very user-friendly.
Yeah.
Granted, I'm a Neanderthal when it comes to these things, but
no less am I, Chris.
yeah, but you're a more refined, polished, elegant Neanderthal.
So I'm a Cro-Magnon?
Yeah, I'm the one who's trying to write my name with my own feces on the cave wall. You've advanced to at least doing, sort of primitive hieroglyphics, and using rocks rather than, your own excrement. So
I see.
you're top shelf, my friend.
So one of you is Gnark and one of you is Captain Caveman. Got it.
And actually, when we're off the air, I do have a question about Marvel Unlimited I want to throw your way in terms of the logistics of the site.
Sure.
So,
absolutely.
all right. So, Murd, I'm sure you'll probably jump in anyway, just because as we talk about this era of Marvel history. So we're talking about Amazing Spider-Man Annual 16 from 1982. Quick shout out to the creative team. Scripted by Roger Stern, one of my all-time favorite Spider-Man scribes. And this I'd forgotten about. That it's drawn by the Romitas, father and son.
Yeah.
Which was really thrilling because I hadn't read this issue in years and I'd forgotten they teamed up on it together because in this time period, Romita Jr. was really cutting his eye teeth on Spider-Man working with Stern. But, Dad lent a hand here and it really shows. Lettered by Jim Novak, colored by the great Stan Goldberg, who's a Silver Age artist, and edited by Tom DeFalco. It also says, proud wife and mom, Virginia Romita.
Yeah, I can definitely feel the Silver Age personality enveloped on this issue. Now that I've read through it, very much. You know how people say that the 80s didn't really start until a few years into the 80s. Well, this issue definitely feels very like 70s to me more than anything else, especially with the way they treat New York itself, which I can get into as we go further into the issue.
That's a good point, my friend, and I'm happy they approach the book that way because, God, I love this whole approach and style.
Yep.
So let's just talk a little bit about the issue itself. I don't want to spoil everything for people who haven't read it, but it is the first appearance, as I say on the cover, presenting the exciting origin of the all-new, all-different, all-terrific Captain Mar-Vell. I love Marvel hyperbole. And Murray, it's pronounced Monica Rambeau.
I'm pretty sure that is the way it's pronounced.
Okay, so we should remind listeners or introduce if they've never heard that this is the first appearance of a brand new spanking character conceived by Roger Stern. I'm going to guess that John Romita Sr. had quite a hand in her costume design because
Definitely.
he was one of Marvel's premier costume designer from 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. So what do you think about that, Ian?
I love the design. Honestly, it's a very dynamic look for her. Good juxtaposition of the silvers and whites and blacks going on there. It's very well pronounced, and I absolutely love her hairstyle.
Oh yeah. Well, as I was reading this again, because again I'd forgotten that John Romita Sr., for me one of the all-time great masters, worked on this and with his son, and Romita Sr. is renowned for drawing gorgeous women, and you can tell that he conceived this character.
Yep.
Because she's stunning, and just like the close-ups of her face, her eyes, it's pure John Romita Sr. So that was a thrill. But just in short, so she's part of the I think the Harbor Patrol in New Orleans, and she's dealing with a at least mildly misogynistic boss who's not giving her the chance to advance in rank, even though she's more than earned that. Again, this is 1982, so well before the Me Too movement, ladies and gentlemen. And the story goes, it's the classic Marvel origin. They go into how she gains the powers. It's not something that she was seeking. She's trying to do good, and she ends up in a situation helping an old friend of her grandfather where she gains the powers of the electromagnetic spectrum. So she can convert herself to all forms of light, X-rays. She can project force blasts. And it's just how she ends up trying to control her powers because they are at a level where she literally could explode with the force of a multi-megaton bomb. And she ends up seeking out the aid of both the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. You get a ton of great guest stars in this annual. We got to remember, this is an annual. Mm-hmm. This is when annuals really meant something. Like, they really put time into an annual. They were longer stories, and often, major events would occur, or at least a well-told yarn. And this is definitely a great example. I really miss annuals like this. And I remember as a kid in the 80s, you'd always look forward to the Marvel annuals when they came out. And Marvel stuck to this, as did DC, for quite some time. So these were a lot of fun.
This was also when the Marvel Universe was way closer integrated than it currently is.
Ian.
As is referenced later on in the issue when she first arrives at the Baxter Building, and it's all in shambles, and there's the that world famous star saying, check out an issue of Fantastic Four. Might have been 226 if I'm remembering correctly, or something along those lines, to find out why the Baxter Building is in shambles like this. So
and that probably refers that's during the Byrne era of the FF, one of the classic eras which we did a spotlight on some years back, and I think they're referring to the attack by Tarax the Tamer, if I remember correctly. But I was going to say, Ian, that one of the many things I loved about returning to this story after so many years was that because Marvel had only been around a couple decades at this point, the Marvel Universe, the continuity is so tight, and everything felt like it was interconnected. It really mattered, and it's such a joy to return to that. And as I mentioned early on in the episode, for me, this is one of the greatest eras in the publishing history of Spider-Man, because Roger Stern, working often with John Romita Jr., for me, wrote one of the all-time great runs in Amazing Spider-Man. This annual is part of that. He introduced the Hobgoblin. Mary Jane came back. I mean, there's so many important events that occur in this era. In fact, I'm holding in my hands the Amazing Spider-Man Omnibus, which is all the work of Roger Stern.
Nice.
Which came out earlier this decade. And if you love the character, and if you've never read these stories, please do yourself a favor and either pick up this omnibus or go on Marvel Unlimited or seek out trades and back issues, because I always go – there's two particular issues, not to go off too much of a tangent, but that for me are sort of the essence of why Spider-Man is such a great timeless character. I'm going to check the index, the table of contents here. Let's see. Amazing Spider-Man 231, 232, Caught in the Act, and Hide in Plain Sight, where Spidey has to take on the Cobra and Mr. Hyde. Very few writers did Spider-Man's quips better than Roger Stern. And you see that in the annual, and you definitely see it in the two issues I just mentioned. So I highly recommend this whole era. So, Ian, what did you just think of the story? Was this the first time you read it?
This was the first time that I read it.
Oh,
yeah.
Then let's hear your impression, sir.
Well, I 100% agree that the art is stunning. I'm wondering if it was Junior inking over Senior, or because I feel like there's a little bit more of a John Romita Jr. style to it. At least at that point in his art, as obviously it had evolved over the years into something very unique and different. But I remember when he was doing the X-Men, his style definitely had a little bit more of this specific look to it when it comes to the faces and.
No, I know what you mean. Yep.
Yeah. But either way, timeless art, especially with the coloring, like you mentioned. It could easily fit into the Silver Age if it wanted to.
Stan Goldberg coloring.
Absolutely. Yeah. While at the same time, as I mentioned, even though it's 82, this is totally 70s New York. The fact that she exits the Port Authority and immediately Peter Parker, still in his civilian clothes, is like, well, what's she doing walking through this neighborhood like this? Clearly, she's immediately going to get robbed. And of course, what happens? She immediately gets robbed, because that's how clear cut this issue is when it comes to its depiction of New York.
Did one of the people mugging her have a mohawk? I have to ask.
He did not. However, he did have a very pronounced hat.
Yes.
One was black. One was
equal opportunity, because the one mugger is white and one is black.
I was just going to say that, Chris. Yep. The two sides just joining forces to mug a random woman because they find her attractive and want to steal her purse.
Yes.
But overall, once we get past that, because it's a paper-thin portrayal of New York, I'm used to that at this point, especially when it comes to the Marvel Comics during the specific era. They had an idea of what things were, and they sure as hell went with it. But I really enjoyed the origin story of Monica. To me, that feels like it was almost like a repackaged number one. Like perhaps they were considering having
a good point. Yeah,
having it be an origin story for her to start an ongoing series, and decided not to, and it wound up in this annual with backing front and back to go along with it, because Spider-Man's easily an ancillary character in this story.
And you're right, because the origin is lengthy. I mean,
yeah,
it's the bulk of the annual.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely. And having it take place in New Orleans was a nice touch. I did not know she was a member of that she wasn't a member of the Air Force. I always kind of thought she was either Navy or Air Force, and it was neither. The fact that she was a member of the Harbor Patrol was news to me. I didn't know that about her origin, so that I'm glad to have read this to know what the actual story behind Monica is, and the fact that she was never a captain until she was Captain Marvel is a nice touch as well.
Yep.
The fact that the professor who finds her, who is friends with her grandfather, keeps calling her El Capitan. Is how the Captain Marvel name rubbed off on the one individual that makes it out of her first appearance alive, and that's he keeps saying Capitan Mar-Vell, and it gets translated into Captain Marvel, and boom, there you go. It was a little too convenient how she found her costume initially.
Mardi Gras cast-offs.
Yes, Mardi Gras cast-offs, and they just happened to find an outfit that fit her absolutely perfectly and was color-coded to match with the mask and everything. Little too convenient, but I'll let it slide. And the rest of the issue worked really well for me. I liked including the Fantastic Four the way they did, even if it was just a thing. Of course, she makes her way there, and immediately Spider-Man is yet again a minute too late until she makes her way over to the mansion, the Avengers mansion, and deals with Jarvis and Iron Man and what have you. And overall, it's a very good introduction to the character. I think you get a very well-rounded take on her personality more than anything else, and that's what I look for in a first appearance. And
that's a testament to how great a writer Roger Stern is.
Yes,
in that you leave the issue having a real sense of who Monica Rambeau is, what drives her, what her sense of integrity, what her values are, and also that she's can handle herself even before she gets her power. She's not someone to be trifled with.
Yep.
As those two woebegone muggers found out. Also, we should point out that if people aren't familiar with Avengers history, and then they noted that in the annual, she goes on to appear in Avengers 227, then she becomes a very important member of the Avengers.
Yes. Throughout
much of the 1980s. She's there present for the classic, the Masters of Evil take over the mansion, which Roger Stern also wrote all those stories as well. Roger Stern was a major writer for Marvel Comics of the 1980s.
Yeah.
Captain America, Avengers, Amazing Spider-Man. He was all over that company, and he wrote some of the best stories Marvel produced in the era. And his Spider-Man run I've always held very close to my heart. In fact, I'm leafing through the issue. This is how just Stern got Spider-Man. There's a great moment where he's on the observation deck of the Empire State Building, and he needs to look through one of the, the like telescopes that are up there, whatever they are, and he doesn't have a quarter. So this little kid comes along, and he says, "I don't believe you're Spider-Man." So Peter then has to take a few precious moments and prove to the kid by climbing up the wall and standing on it, perpendicular. And then the kid finally gives him the quarter. So, that's the essence of Spidey right there.
And clearly he needs pockets like Captain Marvel has, because as we saw earlier on in the issue,
she puts her wallet and keys in there.
Makes life a lot easier. And hey, a woman's costume that actually has pockets. What a concept. Although I since you mentioned her time in the Avengers, Chris, I will point out that they very unceremoniously got rid of her in the Avengers.
That was actually my question, because I've lost track of her character. How did that happen? I don't remember.
If memory serves, there was a change in writer for the Avengers title.
Well, that makes sense because Stern created her. So
right.
Yeah,
and it may have been Gruenwald. It may have been someone else decided that he wanted Captain America back in the Avengers, and in doing so, basically just tossed Monica Rambeau off to the side. She lost her leadership and her chairwoman position.
That's right. She was the chairperson for a while too.
Yeah, very unceremoniously.
I feel like Cap was on the team with her though.
He was, but I think he was back and forth.
Okay.
And also allowed her to be leader, which was important. But if I'm remembering this story correctly, whatever next writer came on decided that he would much rather have Captain America than Captain Marvel in the lead, and she got shafted to the side, which was then made fun of by Warren Ellis in Next Wave. As a throwaway moment, I brought up the panel here because it's still one of my favorite panels. Oh God, now what? This is Monica talking. Oh God, now what? We didn't have to deal with this kind of thing in the Avengers. It's a gamma-activated bullmen from beyond the 19th perimeter, and they're naked. And then Captain America says, "Cover your eyes, go back to Avengers Mansion, and make my dinner."
Oh God. Warren Ellis. Yep. And wasn't the character renamed? Was it Photon?
Yes. The characters had many different names over the years.
Okay.
She's been Photon. She's been Pulsar. I think she's called Spectrum right now.
Yeah, I didn't know about the Spectrum change. That's news to me, but I'll take your word for it there, Murd.
And we know from trailers that the Monica Rambeau will appear in some fashion in the Captain Marvel film.
Yes. I'm hearing mixed reports on exactly how she's included, but we'll know soon enough because I'm going to see it tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I should be seeing it over the weekend.
Yep.
Another thing I want to point out about why I love the annuals, if you go to the back of the annual, they have two pinup pages, The Tangled Web of Romance, The Many Loves of Peter Parker. And they take you through all of the women Peter's been involved with, either directly or wanted to be involved with him or what have you. So that's a great little page. And then they have, imagine how much fun it must be to work at the Daily Bugle. And of course they have Jonah ranting from his office and, the various people involved in the Bugle at that time. Ben Urich, Robbie, that obnoxious photographer, Lance Banyan, who's Peter's rival at the time, and so forth. So
excellent.
Great stuff.
Yep.
All right. Anything else anyone wants to say about Monica Rambeau?
Just that I appreciate the fact that for a while, not only was she one of the more prominent female characters in the Marvel Universe, but she was one of the more prominent black female characters.
Oh, yeah.
In the Marvel Universe, which was very hard to come by for a while there. And I appreciate the fact that she's gotten a little bit more of her standing back over the past couple of years, especially.
Well, how are they using her now? Because I've lost touch with that character.
Well, she was in. I actually mentioned, I think, on our nomination show that she was a member of the Ultimates with Al Ewing.
Okay.
So she was somewhat more recently in that. She was also in Mighty Avengers, the Luke Cage version after the events of Marvel Now. And I'm not quite sure where she is this specific moment, but she is still definitely involved one way or the other in
I'm
the
glad to hear
Marvel
that.
universe. Yep.
Because again, her role in the Avengers in the '80s was really prominent, and Stern really took the time to develop her character.
Yep.
She's a great addition to the Marvel universe in the '80s, and again, like I said, just to wax nostalgic for another moment, this is a period where I so love Marvel comics and the Marvel universe, and to return to it through one of these stories is a real treat. So thanks, Ian, again for this suggestion.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I'll point out to people that as of February, there is a new Captain Marvel Monica Rambeau trade paperback out there. So if anybody wants to read this very annual that we were discussing, that's included in there, as well as Avengers Volume 1, issues 227 and 279, Marvel Team Up, numbers 142 and 143, a Captain Marvel one-shot from 1989, which memory serves, I believe, is Dwayne McDuffie.
I think memory does indeed serve you, Ian.
Excellent. And then Marvel Unplugged number 5 and material from Solo Avengers number 2 and Marvel Fanfare number 42 and 57.
Ian, that was extremely sexy. Man.
I thank my sexy voice and Wikipedia.
Hell yeah. All right, let's move on to our next character then, gentlemen.
A favorite of both mine and Murd's. Murd, you want to take point on this one?
Happy to, Ian. Okay, so this, we're talking about the first issue of the very short-lived 1995 volume of Captain Marvel, which introduces us to the character of Mar-Vell's artificially created son, Genis-Vell, as, our introduction to him in the role of Captain Marvel. The character's first actual appearance was in Silver Surfer Annual number 6, which is part of a whole themed series of annuals I'm pretty sure it was 1993, in which each Marvel annual of that year introduced a new character. And one of the very few of those new characters that went on to matter in any way in the Marvel Universe was young Genis-Vell, who at that time called himself Legacy, which was his little snot-nosed, brash young adult way of both paying homage to the fact that he had a famous father while still neglecting to fully assume he's acknowledging he has a legacy without actually assuming that legacy all the way. So he's kind of hedging his bet by calling himself that.
Yep.
But this issue of Captain Marvel number 1, cover dated December of 95, is the first time that he appears as Captain Marvel. And the funny thing about it is he's Captain Marvel to everyone except himself in this first issue. As far as he's concerned, he's still calling himself Legacy, but everybody else in the comic, including the people publishing the comic, Marvel Comics, think of him as Captain Marvel, because marketing. So he's constantly correcting people. I think it takes until issue 3 or 4 when he finally just says, Sprocket, I'll be Captain Marvel now. But he's still, as of the first issue of the series, he's still kind of fighting against that. The creative team was written by Fabian Nicieza, who was then one of Marvel's brightest stars. He'd been writing a couple of Marvel's hottest properties of the early 90s, the X-Men and the New Warriors. And he kind of goes out of his way in his little writer's essay on the final page of the issue to stress that he was too busy and too important at Marvel at the time to originally take on this assignment. But then eventually, I guess his schedule cleared up, and Mark Gruenwald, who is not only editor-in-chief, he also became, he was also served as the editor for the Captain Marvel series. He finally gave Fabian Nicieza enough leeway that he was able to step aside from the other things he has cooking and act as writer of this series. The pencils are by Ed Benes. This is his first ever work for Marvel.
Yep.
Inks by Mike Sellers, colors by Marie Javins. And you can kind of tell from just looking at the front cover. Now, because this is 1995 and it's a first issue for Marvel, it is, of course, foil stamped. And not only is it foil stamped, there's a foil stamped tramp stamp right there on Genis's right buttock, which reads, "Kiss me, I'm Kree."
Oh, boy.
So, amongst all the sparkly gold foil, standing beneath the Captain Marvel logo, you see Genis posing. We see him from behind. He's got his hand on one hip, and he's looking over his members-only jacketed shoulder at the viewer, and he's saying, "Deal with it." So this from the cover.
It's the 90s, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes,
it's the 90s of Marvel Comics.
And there's two ways you can tell it's the 90s. Not only the jacket, which literally every character in the 90s had at that point, but also the headdress.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Giant Man had that headdress at one point in the 90s.
He did?
Pretty sure Hawkeye had that headdress at one point in the 90s. And at least 2 or 3 other characters probably had it that I'm not thinking of at the moment. But yeah.
Look beyond Marvel and DC. Even a lot of Image characters had that kind of like half cowl thing that he's sporting.
Havoc too, actually. Now that I think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with the ponytail coming out the back too, just to make it even 90s-er. The whole comic from cover on down is just drenched in a cologne shower of 90s attitude.
Absolutely.
And as we move on into the issue itself, which is entitled Junior Achievement, it kind of jumps around in time, it's become kind of a familiar storytelling device nowadays, and it wasn't infrequently employed back then either. But we sort of jump back and forth between when we first see Genis-Vell in this issue, he's just gone on a 3-day bender in a seedy warehouse on the seedy planet of Calculex, on which he makes his home base. But he's been using all kinds of drugs and drink, and he's been carousing with a couple of loose women. And his supporting cast finds him. Glib Arcanian, who is a lackadaisian troll, the same as Adam Warlock's friend Pip. And his 2 waitresses, Stecky and Zoog. Zoog is the one with the horse head. She's a Chimelian, which is the same alien race that is responsible for the Power Pack having their powers. So this he is showing that he knows his way around the Marvel cosmos. He's using a couple of pre-existing Marvel alien races here. They find him, they drag him out of the gutter, they clean him up and wake him up, and they slowly drag out of him what has been happening to him over the past several days. And we, the readers, gradually learn that he has been duped by representatives of his father's own alien race, the Kree, and the Shi'ar, with whom the Kree had recently been engaged in a pretty serious intergalactic battle, which Marvel readers remember as Operation Galactic Storm.
Ah, yes.
Yep.
So this story is happening just a couple of years in the wake of that, which legitimately did very seriously affect the status of the Kree Empire in the Marvel Universe for at least the next 10 years worth of comics that followed. So here we are, just like 2.5 years, I think, after that story happened. And representatives of the Kree Empire approach young Genis-Vell in his hideout on Calculex. He's just finished very heroically scaring off a couple of purse snatchers, using nothing but his father's reputation as a weapon. He just tells them, they call him Captain Marvel, as every other character in the story does. And he just says, I'm going to lay this much hurt on you. It's going to take that much doctoring to heal you. And they're like, oh, okay, he's Captain Marvel. We'll believe him. So they give back the purse and run away. And then this Kree general, who is a pre-existing Marvel character, I might add. I'm trying to find his name. Yeah, here he is. General Beldan shows up and tells Genis that his help is needed. He needs to use his negabands, which I should also add are not the same negabands that his father, the Mar-Vell, used. We learn in his first appearance back in Silver Surfer Annual number 6, his mother, Elysius, actually bought these negabands for him. She bartered using a red solar crystal that Mar-Vell had sculpted into the shape of a star for her. He had acquired the raw material for it from the heart of a red giant. It was priceless. And so she bought these negabands for her son. And in this issue, we see that he's just basically squandering their power, just kind of running around, playing hero, not taking anything too seriously. He doesn't even have any clue how these negabands actually work, as we learn later in this issue. But this Kree general comes and contacts this young Turk and tells him, look, there's a miniature version of the Nega Bomb that decimated the Kree Empire in Operation Galactic Storm. It's on board a Shi'ar space station right now. The Shi'ar are our allies now. We really want to help them out, so we need your help with your negabands to go in there and remove this Negabomb, because your bands are about the only thing that can safely shield it to remove it. So Genis goes soaring off half-cocked. He's kind of overcome by misguided nationalism. He's always kind of felt ambivalent at best about the Kree Empire because of the way they treated his father, branding him an outlaw and a traitor and all of that, hounding his every step after he rebelled against the Kree Empire for a higher good. But the Kree, being very militaristic and imperialistic, they're never one to forgive such a betrayal. There's a scene a little bit later on where this Kree general is conversing with his Shi'ar conspirators, and the Shi'ar are rebuking him for having such a bad attitude towards Captain Mar-Vell. I'll quote what the Shi'ar are saying to him about Mar-Vell. Quote, "He was an honorable warrior who, through his own courage, was enabled to see the universe with a greater clarity of vision than those provided by the jingoistic rhythms of empires and individual creeds." So the Shi'ar had some respect for the elder Mar-Vell, but they clearly don't for young Genis, because they say, nevertheless, it is all a moot point when dealing with this self-titled legacy. And the Kree general agrees, indeed it is. The boy is all the things his father wasn't. Impetuous, brash, overconfident. That is why he is the perfect foil for our most carefully laid out plans. And Genis blunders right into their trap. He goes to the Shi'ar space station. He tries to disarm and remove the miniature negabomb, but instead it detonates right in his face. The negabands apparently protect him, but 2,000 other sentient beings aboard the station die. There's a big double-page spread of the exploding space station, and that's what prompts...
Forgive me for a minute. I have a question. I forgot. Is the negabomb like the cosmic equivalent of an atomic bomb? What does it do?
It
do
explodes.
Okay. Well,
it is very much the equivalent of the A-bomb, Chris. The conclusion of Operation Galactic Storm, very strong shades of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep, and this was a miniature version of that bomb, so it wasn't quite as powerful, but still enough to disrupt the space-time continuum for a few hundred light years around, and certainly enough to end the lives of the 2,000 people aboard the space station when it blows. So that's what inspires Genis to go on his little bender, and then his friends, just pull him back on his feet, and he's, of course, blaming himself for what happens. But then his friend Glib, the troll, tells him, here's some scuttlebutt that's making the rounds on the Interop, which is apparently like the intergalactic news feed, which suggesting that he was set up, that maybe the Shi'ar and Kree were actually conspiring against him and using him as a cat's paw, trying to paint him as some kind of radical Kree rebel who detonated the bomb on purpose to strike a blow against the Shi'ar. And, of course, none of this is anywhere near true. But that then propels Genis-Vell off on the next leg of his quest to fully assume, against his will, the legacy of his father. And that's going to take him to Earth to confer with, among other people, Rick Jones, his father's old partner, and who will later, as Ian and I know, having read the Peter David written Genis-Vell series, Rick Jones and Genis would eventually form a partnership very similar to the one that Mar-Vell and Rick once enjoyed.
Yep.
Yeah, when I think of the Genis-Vell character, all I think of is that Peter David series and his appearances in Avengers Forever.
I also think of the Thunderbolts, which coincidentally was written by Mr. Nicieza.
That's right.
Yeah, kind of
well
think
done.
that
Well done, Ian.
Mr. Nicieza was able to finish up this. This 1995 Captain Marvel series was canceled after 6 issues due to low sales. But he did get to come back and guest write an issue of the Peter David Captain Marvel Genis-Vell series, in which he basically encapsulates his whole second arc on the character into a single issue and thrusts that into as kind of a flashback fill-in issue of that series. So he did get it to at least put a period to his take on Genis-Vell.
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten about that, Murd. Thanks for the reminder.
Murd, clutch.
No, my pleasure. It just seemed this incarnation of Genis-Vell is forgotten to most people, it seems. As Ian was telling us before we began recording, the first issue of the 1995 volume of Captain Marvel is not available on most, if not all, of the standard online digital comics sources.
Yep.
It's not on Marvel Unlimited, and it's not on Comixology.
Yeah. So
it's forgotten to most. And really, revisiting it here, it's striking just how very different, Genis-Vell was in this kind of larval stage of his character from what he was after going through the cosmic time-space ringer that was Avengers Forever and coming out the other side for Peter David to write. By that point, he'd basically become a completely different person.
Yeah, and I can't even tell you how much I prefer that version of the character over this one. I mean, this one comes off as brash and arrogant more than anything else, which I can understand because he's not experienced. He doesn't even know how to use his negabands at this point. And he's going out there, trying to create a quote-unquote legacy for himself, which he, again, so aptly calls himself, without even realizing that in order to really make a legacy for yourself, you got to know what the hell you're doing. And he's not there yet. He really isn't. I appreciate that Nicieza, tries to at least give him his comeuppance, because he just brashly jumps right into helping out the Kree here, and it bites him right in the butt. So at least he hopefully will learn a lesson from this, and I might have to track down the rest of these issues to try and figure out whether or not he did actually learn a lesson. But considering it's only 6 issues, I doubt he learned the full lesson. But nevertheless, it's enjoyable enough for a first issue, and the art. For Ed Benes's first outing with Mar-Vell, I was actually really impressed. It's not nearly as the style that we know Ed Benes for in later iterations of his work. But then again, just like I was talking about with John Romita Jr., it takes a while to find your own voice and personality. He's still very much 90s Image at this point, but it's decent 90s Image. I'll also point out that in the credits, they call him Edward Benes, and then in the letters page, they call him Eduardo Benes. So they haven't even figured out what to call him yet.
Yeah, it was very new to the American scene at that point.
Yeah.
He'd done a few things for DC by then.
Yep.
Ian, I have to admit that what you just described is why I really struggled through this issue.
Yeah.
Full disclaimer, I in general despise most 90s Marvel product.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a low point for the company and for a lot of comics in general. I think a lot of that decade is a wasteland for superhero comics. There's great things that Vertigo was doing, for example, that I revere, but a lot of this decade I struggled with. Then, and now when I go back to it, I'm like, God, how did I read even half this stuff?
Well, Chris, I have to read the Mar-Vell Universe page that's included with this copy you and I got a hold of, to just say some of the things that were on the stand at the time that this issue was coming out. Fantastic Four was being written at that point still by DeFalco, and this was right when
dreadful.
Oh God, this was right when Reed Richards and Dr. Doom were quote unquote coming back from the dead. After
that's when Reed had his beard. Yeah,
yep,
it was awful.
It was really bad.
And I like Tom DeFalco, but not that stuff.
Yeah. This was as The Crossing was happening with the Avengers, which is one of the worst storylines in the history of the Avengers.
Easily,
it's the comic reading. It's the comic reading equivalent of a very long and arduous root canal.
But the diamond in the rough, Captain America by Wade and Garney, was
which they canceled very swiftly and then turned over to Rob Liefeld.
Yes, they did.
Oh.
That Wade Garney run is a classic.
Mm-hmm.
That was like when that book came out, that Captain America, that was like getting just a head rush of oxygen. I'm on the stretcher and they got to put the mask on my face because I just can't breathe. And then I get that comic and I just felt better.
Also, the Last Avengers story, which I remember reading at one point and I actually really enjoyed. That was Peter David. Yep, Peter David and Ariel Olivetti. Yep.
Yep, very good.
I remember there were clear acetate covers, and I remember the main character was an aging and overweight Hank Pym going up against a lot of Ultrons.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, indeed.
When not to get too much off on a tangent in terms of 90s bashing, but I remember when Marvels came out, I was like, oh God, this is so good. And Kurt Busiek, and that was my introduction to him as a writer, even though he'd been writing before, I just didn't realize it. And it was fun going back to this because I love the Genis-Vell Peter David. I think it's a classic.
Same here.
But to read this, which I never read, I knew about Legacy and all that, but to see basically that this comic captures everything that turned me off about a lot of superhero comics in the 90s. And I'll be very frank, most of the 90s Image stuff I can't stand.
Yeah.
Then and now. I mean, I think Today Image has fully realized the company's true purpose. I think has been fully realized in recent years, actually, and in terms of what I think making a great contribution to the medium. But while I respect the artists who went off on their own back then, it doesn't mean they could write stories because they couldn't, most of them. And to see that same sensibility in Marvel Comics at the time, like you said, the ridiculous hairstyles, the shoulder padded jackets, it just really doesn't hold up. And I didn't even like it back then, and I doubly don't like it now. And I like Fabian Nicieza as a writer. I love some of his X-Men work, for example.
His Cable Deadpool was outstanding.
Yeah, and he has a good sense of character and dialogue. I mean, like I think he wrote the Gene Scott wedding, which was I thought was an excellent issue. X-Men 30, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
You do.
Thank you, Mert. But this was just for me. This was a morass to wade through this story. And the art style, and like you said, like artists evolve, and I fully appreciate that. But again, it just smacked of that 90s image style. I loathe then, and I loathe it now.
Oh yeah, I'm looking specifically at the spacing between Genis-Vell's eyes in his one panel that are so far apart and facing in complete opposite directions that just a better, I'm sure that today Ed Benes looks back on this art and says, "What the hell was I doing?" But even a better editor would have caught that and been like, "Could you do us a favor and just space those a little bit closer?"
Well, and yeah, I mean, I admire Ed Benes in general. I'm not, attacking him.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's early in his career. That's to be expected.
Yeah.
I mean, you can read interviews with the great Herb Trimpe, where in the 90s, before Marvel, unceremoniously dumped him after decades of service, they were actually trying to make Herb Trimpe draw like this. Herb Trimpe.
Yeah. I'm looking at a cover to one of it right now because on that same Marvel Universe page, Fantastic Four Unlimited number 12.
Right.
Written by Roy Thomas with art by Herb Trimpe, but it's barely Herb Trimpe.
No.
Yeah. See, that was the first Herb Trimpe art I'd ever seen. And
what a shame, Herb.
Yes, I'm afraid that was the first impression I had of Herb Trimpe, and I'm afraid I still haven't gone back and seen enough of his earlier artwork to have disabused myself of the idea that that's what his art looks like.
Well, that was at the very end of his career at Marvel. I mean, that's an outlier. I mean, most of his work looks nothing like that at all. And I think I get a little hot under the collar as a fan with this kind of stuff because one of the things I can't – and you see it in so many different forms of popular culture and art when it comes to trends. When mediocrity is championed and held up as some great standard, and when they're championing this mediocrity because it's marketable, and they cast off to the side truly great artists and creators for this junk, and like what was done to Herb Trimpe, I thought was just disgraceful. And like we just read this Spider-Man annual number, was it 16?
Yeah, and
John Romita Sr. for Pete's sake.
Yep.
I mean, come on. It's just it's a pet peeve of mine, and not just in comics, but when people hold up mediocrity, which it clearly is for me, as some great paragon of art. And it was fun to go back to that sense because I actually had a visceral reaction to this issue. I'm like, God, this is crap. Like I can't, like this is what they were peddling in comics in general, like at least in the superhero stuff at the time. And I was like, God, this is making all kinds of money too. Like, what's wrong with our culture? And I mean, I'm being melodramatic, of course, because it's comics, but still, I mean, you could take that to a whole different, many different areas of popular art and culture, and I'm just like, this stuff's not good, and it's just not good.
Now, do either of you have either of you actually heard of the character Lunatic? Which is also
by Keith Giffen.
Yes, that's why I had never in my life ever heard of that character either. So that's why I was wondering whether you had, Murd, because I saw that also advertised here, not written by Keith Giffen but co-created by Keith Giffen, as one of the things being advertised here. And just even the spelling of the name just screams 90s to me.
Totally, yeah. I didn't buy the Lunatic miniseries, but I do have a couple issues of Marvel Comics Presents.
Oh, nice.
That kind of had like a preview appearance or two by that character, and I think Giffen might actually created those.
It wouldn't surprise me.
What's also interesting, and again, it's fun that we're actually really looking at three different we're looking in this episode, 3 different stories from 3 different eras. You always get a sense of the style of the era. Like the Amazing Spider-Man annual, some people will be turned off by that because there's a lot of dialogue, there's caption boxes, and I love that. I mean, especially when the writer is skilled like Roger Stern. These 90s stories, you have more of that over-the-top sensibility with the artwork and the style and the kind of in-your-face storytelling and the artwork and so forth. Then we'll talk a little bit later on about the Carol Danvers stories from the 2000s, which are very different and also I think a hell of a lot better than what we're looking at in it right now. And again, I'm not dissing any of the creators involved. I think Fabian Nicieza is a fine writer. I mean, we know Bendis went on to become an accomplished artist. To me, this is more – it's not about the creators. It's more about the marketing of the time, what was being extolled as like great comics in terms of the mainstream. I mean, we have to remember that at the same time this junk was being published, there's books like Sam and Mystery Theater that were out there. I mean, I'm so glad that Genis-Vell was revived in the hands of Peter David. And was it Chris Cross was the artist for a lot of that series?
Yes.
Whose art style was perfect for the sensibility David was following through with that character. And again, in the hands of a great writer in the right time, I think Genis-Vell was fully realized. And of course, we can't forget that Peter David also brought humor, far more sophisticated and subtle humor to the character.
Definitely.
Which did him a real service. So. Yep.
Well, I think we have to say that your peak was pretty well justified, Chris, because just beyond just using our own senses as readers here, just take a look at the title page here. Like the caption beneath the title reads, "He's back again because no one demanded it."
Yeah.
They even italicized that. Well, you already paid for the sucker, so keep reading. So it's as if they're admitting that even they think they've got a turkey on their hands. Those involved just don't seem to have very high opinion of or nor hopes for the character. I'm looking at that little column written by Fabian Nicieza on the back page as well. He's saying, well, first he talks about his former devotion to the original Captain Marvel and how if his teenage self had been told that he would one day go on to turn down a chance to write a Captain Marvel series, he would have been fit to be tied. He goes on to say, Shane, too, loved the original, really like what the Ron boys, Mars and Lim, who are the creators of the Genis-Vell character, did with this hokey, accelerated sun dude legacy. So that's what Nicieza thinks of the character as it was before it was handed to him, a hokey, accelerated son.
Yeah.
Which I guess we might as well point out as well that he's kind of comparable to the clone Superboy, Con-El, over at DC.
Oh, very much
he's
so.
An artificially created offspring of a legendary hero, and also that he's kind of a willful, spoiled brat who needs to learn to fit into the big shoes into which he's trying to step.
Murd, I didn't even think about that. Thank you for bringing it up. Considering the leather jacket and the overall personality, yes, you're absolutely right. This was Marvel's attempt at making
good point, Murd.
Connor Kent. Yep.
Now, quick question before we move on to Carol Danvers: is Genis-Vell dead now? I guess it's the wrong question.
It is a long story. It is a long story. Yeah.
He's not being mentioned a whole lot by anybody at Marvel these days because, as far as anybody there is concerned, the Captain Marvel who's appearing in what's sure to be a multi-million-dollar motion picture is the only one they care to acknowledge, and they're not going to muddy the waters by delving into past versions of the character.
Yeah.
Well, except for Monica Rambeau, since some version of her is going to be in the movie. So that's why that trade that Ian mentioned earlier is going to happen. But yeah, Genis-Vell and any of the progeny of the original Mar-Vell are kind of just swept under the rug right now.
Which is disappointing because I actually really enjoyed Phyla as her original iteration in the Guardians of the Galaxy series was excellent. In those first Abnett and Lanning issues. And she also really was a very fun supporting character in Genis's own Captain Marvel series while it was going on. They tried to rename Genis Photon when he was a member of the Thunderbolts.
Which ticked off Monica Rambeau because Yeah, she took on the name Photon when Genis-Vell came on the scene because she figured he had more right to the name and legacy of Captain Marvel, being the genetic son of the original. So she stepped down and kind of, just to the class act that she is, she assumed the name Photon. But then Genis comes back to Earth and becomes Photon and basically rooks poor Monica out of her second code name. So
yeah.
That was a whole big thing between them in Thunderbolts, as I recall.
It was, and it was well done, and it was well written. Where we know he is right now is, I think he's still in between a moment in time, like he's stuck in reality somewhere. So if somebody did ever want to rip him back out, and please have that person's name start with a Peter and end with a David, then go ahead and do so, because I'd love to see this character come back someday. But for now, he's in eternal limbo.
Okay.
I could almost see somebody at Marvel like bringing him out of cold storage to act as an antagonist for Carol Danvers. If they did, though, I'm afraid that person's name would not be either Peter or David.
To find out who the true legacy is.
Well, once again, I highly recommend, if people have any listeners who have not read the Peter David Captain Mar-Vell and then his appearance in Thunderbolts, their highest recommendation.
Yes.
It's a fantastic series.
Definitely.
Amen.
Yep. All right.
All right, should we move on to Carol Danvers, gentlemen?
Well, let me have a last word about Genis here.
Sure.
One more quote from Fabian Nicieza on the letters page here. His idea of what he was ultimately going to do with Genis, and which I'm pretty sure he didn't get a chance to do in its entirety, was, he says here, what we've got, I hope, and all apologies to James Robinson, who did it first, interesting comparison there, is a really interesting young snot of a comic book character who has to learn to be an adult at the same time as he's learning how to be a hero. So that's his take on this arc that he's got here. He thought he was writing his Marvel's version of Jack Knight, and actually he was writing Marvel's version of Con-El, as we've said. So I have every faith that, unimpressive as this first issue may have been, Nicieza might have taken Genis-Vell in some better directions, made a better, more likable, more well-rounded character out of him. Sales being what they are, and Marvel's publishing policies being what they are, just kind of flooding the market with a few issues of any character that they could get their hands on. He didn't really get his chance to do what he wanted with the character. So I'm a little sorry about that. But on the bright side, Peter David came in and did what Fabian Nicieza never had a chance to do, and probably did it better than he would have anyway. So all's well that ends well. And as a final note, Ian, I apologize for making you, and also you, Chris, slog through this. The original idea was for us to talk about the first issue of that Peter David and Chris Cross Captain Marvel series. And I had to speak up and say, oh, no, that is not the actual first appearance of the character in the legacy role.
Hey, Murd, honestly, I'm kind of glad you did, just because now I get to see the evolution of the character.
Absolutely, Murd.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think this is totally appropriate, because I'd never actually read this story.
Yeah.
So no, hey, it's like Ian said, it's a first appearance, and you appreciate the evolution, because we're all such fans of the Peter David era. And it's interesting that Nicieza was mentioning Starman indirectly, because unlike this, DC gave Robinson the room to develop that title.
Sure. And
we got, for me, one of the greatest superhero series ever, as far as I'm concerned. So something to be said for giving a creator some room to maneuver and flex their muscles and work something out with a character.
Absolutely. And hey, I started reading comics in the 90s. It was nice to take a trip back in time.
Yep. Well, I was right there with you, Ian.
Yep.
And this is a little tarnished and flawed gem from the very early days of my collection that I fished out of my drawer boxes for the first time in a long time. So thanks for soaring along the memory skyway with me, guys.
My pleasure. And hey, if I survived the Clone Saga, and I survived the death of Reed Richards, and I survived Leather Jacket Avengers, I can survive this one issue.
Oof, and oof.
Wow, Ian, that was. Come on, man! I'm gonna go to a fetal position. That laundry list you just unleashed there. Holy mackerel!
Suck it up, soldier.
but I
gotta,
had, but I
bite
had,
down on a stick like I'm back in the Civil War, and they don't have anesthesia available. My God!
but I had Niciez's X-Men to get me through it all. So go figure.
Yep, that's true.
That was quality material. And I agree with what you said about his Cable Deadpool run. I've just started to read it, and I know I've got good times ahead.
Excellent. Happy to hear it.
All right, gentlemen, Carol Danvers. Now, if I may, before we get to the actual issue, I just want to give a little bit of background for listeners, because Carol Danvers is a very not to a Hawkman level, but her history can be a little convoluted. If you guys don't mind, I'm just going to do a quick little aside on her first appearances, so to speak.
Go right ahead.
So Carol Danvers, the human being who is a member of the Air Force, first appears, I believe, in Marvel Superheroes 13 in, I want to say, 1967 or 68, when the original Mar-Vell, who's posing as Walter Lawson at a United States space facility, she is the security head of that facility. And that's where she first meets Mar-Vell. And then in Captain Marvel #1 in 68, when Marvel finally shucks free of their restrictive circulation contract with DC, and they're able to publish more titles, and they gave Captain Marvel his own book. And in that issue is when he saves her when he's fighting, I think he's fighting the errant sentry, the Kree sentry that the Fantastic Four had fought earlier. And there's an explosion, and he protects her, but they retcon later that his DNA fuses with hers, which is what actually gives her powers. And then, of course, in the 70s, we have the Miss Marvel series, which I want to say Chris Claremont wrote.
He did.
Yeah, thank you. And that's where she has her 1970s costume with, the midriff and the cape and the red and blue outfit. And then she morphs from that into an Avenger in the 80s. And go back to our Avengers spotlight on the Copper Age, where we talk about what happens to Carol Danvers when she's an Avenger. And the massive creative clusterfudge where every creator involved now denies knowing what was actually going on when they basically allow Carol to be cosmically roofied and raped by I think it was the son of Immortus.
Mm-hmm. Marcus Immortus.
Oof.
Yes. That's a fascinating and frankly creepy period there for the character. And then we get into later on when Rogue will bond with her and steal her memories and her powers. Later on, she'll become the cosmic power being Binary, which I think has nothing to do with her Kree origins, if I remember correctly. Can you flesh that out at all, Murda, with the Binary character?
I wish I could. I think I've even read the issue in which she first becomes Binary, but it's just at the time I think it was explained as just the evolving nature of her powers, especially as having been partially siphoned off by Rogue. Okay,
that makes sense. I'm kind of not doing that just because I don't remember fully. Binary was featured in the X-Men, and then eventually she kind of returns back to the Miss Marvel persona. As I'm going through this, I need to do a Carol Danvers spotlight because I forgot how involved her history actually is.
Yeah.
Because we also have to remember that there was a period of time where in the Claremont X-Men run in the 80s, which I really love when they're in Australia and all that there's a version of Carol's persona in Rogue that Rogue is actually kind of in conflict with and talking to. So there's that version of Carol also.
By the way, Chris, it was actually it was an encounter with the Brood that turned her into Binary.
Okay.
She was in space with the X-Men, and then somehow through that encounter with the Brood gained the star powers of Binary.
Okay, thank you. And again, as I go through this, I got to do this character justice down the road because this is an pretty involved history.
Yeah.
And then ultimately she will sort of regain herself in terms of being the Miss Marvel persona. She returns to that. She calls herself Warbird at one point. I'm rushing through a lot of stuff right now. and then ultimately she takes on this. Where we're talking about the full mantle of Captain Mar-Vell, which really goes back to the beginning of her history in the '60s when she first met Mar-Vell. And I believe the movie's going to have. I'm pretty sure Jude Law is playing Mar-Vell in the film that we're going to see.
Yes.
In short order. So we'll see how they interpret that.
So one thing, a couple of things I want to bring up actually. In the '90s, while she was still running around as Ms. Mar-Vell before she became Warbird, Kurt Busiek actually introduced her alcoholism.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And
she was a supporting character in his Iron Man series, as I recall.
Yes.
That's right. That was a damn good. That's right. Well done, Ian. Clutch.
It was a favorite of the time for me because even when Frank Thierry took over the title, it was lights out good, and Tony really helped her get through it.
Yeah, he was sponsoring her essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it helped them bond further, and it's definitely been further developed throughout the years in Marvel Comics as them being very, very close because of that. And I also really enjoyed her series in the 2000s as Ms. Mar-Vell. That
was a good series. Yes, it was.
Yeah, yep. I owned the whole thing and read it all the way through. Brian Reed was the original writer of that.
Very good.
Yep, good stuff. Now here we are with Captain Mar-Vell. You guys mind if I take the lead?
Please.
Okay, so, as is the case with some of the other things that we've been discussing, technically the character of Captain Mar-Vell first appeared in Avenging Spider-Man #9, but I'm just going to go through that issue really quickly here because it really isn't anything to do with what we're talking about, just because it's more of the Avenging Spider-Man title was more of a Marvel team-up style book. Yep. And Kelly Sue DeConnick wrote a two-parter involving Captain Mar-Vell and Spider-Man, where they're dealing with a new character named Robin Hood, who I don't think has ever showed up again. Robyn Hood.
Yeah, she was very much an Occupy Wall Street inspired character.
Very much so. Gorgeous art by the Dodsons in the issue itself, but it's mainly just a heist scenario where they're dealing with Robin Hood intervening. And she's got almost like giant man abilities, and she's getting in the way of Peter and Carol as they're trying to deal with this heist that's going on. And that really not much else to say about that particular issue. But with Captain Mar-Vell #1, also written by Kelly Sue DeConnick, with art by Dexter Soy. Not an artist I'm very familiar with. His style is very unique. It's I want to say it's very computer colored, or at least that's the style that they went with here. Not a very. It may even just be not even inking and just going straight to colors, which was very much the style of that particular moment in time with Marvel Comics. But I like it and I don't at the same time. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Lionel Francis Yu's stuff. But a little bit more gritty and at times a little bit harder to follow. But that's beside the point. Kelly Sue DeConnick is, all intents and purposes, the premier Captain Mar-Vell writer. She made Carol what she was, and this movie would not be happening today without Kelly Sue DeConnick. 100%.
Well, I'm sorry, Ian, go ahead.
That and the costume design by Jamie McKelvey. Because his costume design for Captain Mar-Vell is so striking, and if she was still wearing the lightning bolt bikini, I don't think she would have became the character that she was.
Absolutely not. And let me tell you, I had not read this issue prior to the prep for this episode. Mm-hmm. I loved this comic.
Yeah,
and what I loved about it was, and again, the mark of a skilled writer. In one issue, she brings in all the threads of Carol's history.
Yep.
All of them. I mean, Mar-Vell, when she used to be a magazine writer in the Bronze Age, her Air Force experience, her avenging, everything is in this story and so well executed. And again, it really takes an outstanding writer to do all this in one issue and to do it cleanly without it feeling cluttered and so forth. you really get a sense of who Carol Danvers is, where she came from, what her potential is, and what potentially what her destiny is as a hero. And I couldn't agree more, Ian. I mean, the movie's right there.
Yep.
I mean, with this, and I haven't read the rest of the series, but I intend to, because I love the first issue. And I've loved Carol's character for years, but I just think it just the essence of what makes Carol Danvers a great character. DeConnick just nails it in this issue.
Yep.
And her grit, her determination, the fact that she can be very hard-headed, just how intrepid she is, and just everything, and like the callback to the female pilot who inspired her when she was much younger, all of it. I mean, this issue really blew me away. I was so impressed with it because I had not read any of that particular series, but just extremely well done.
I remembered reading it when it first came out.
Top-flight writing.
Yeah, definitely. I remember reading it when it first came out because I think at the time I was experimenting and just picking up, first issues and saw that this was Carol. And since I'd loved the Ms. Marvel series as much as I did, I figured I would give it a shot. And I didn't really follow up afterwards. I'm not even sure why. I think I might have just decided to wait for trade and then kind of forgot. But it is a title I'm definitely going to go back to and read through on Marvel Unlimited, since it's all there and it's easy to access. I love the use, even in the first couple of pages here as well, of Crusher Creel, the Absorbing Man. What did he absorb? The moon.
Moon powers.
Yes. All right, sure, why not? But he's the one who calls her out on the name Ms. Marvel, and essentially tries to call her Captain America's secretary, which very much gets under her skin. And once her and Cap get through Crusher, they're back at the mansion, and he's essentially like, why don't you just take up the mantle?
Yeah, it's a great conversation.
It's a fantastic conversation.
Really well written.
And it brings us back, Murd, to the legacy of Captain Marvel. How Genis wasn't there in that issue that we read.
Yep, not mentioned at all.
Nope. But he wasn't there in that issue that we read. He was not ready to take up the mantle of Captain Marvel. And here we are with a character who is very much ready for that and has to be told that she's ready to realize just how ready she is. She goes ahead and decides that, it's about damn time for it. And, through conversation with both Steve and then later with Peter, because her and Spider-Man have developed a friendship over the years, not just as, Ms. Marvel, but also through their time in the Avengers.
Right.
That they very much have are confidants. I'd say. He comments on her new hairstyle, and is all there for the fact that she's ready for it. I love the helmet as well. How they introduce it and how that's her way of getting through space. The way she is, brilliant concept, and just every part of that just works for me as a character.
Well, I also really enjoyed, and I echo everything you said, Ian, but they always go back, and especially in the hands of a good writer who knows the history, they always go back to how deeply esteemed Mar-Vell is among all the other Marvel characters. Mm-hmm. Those who remembered him and fought by his side and so forth. And you can tell, just because she was with the Captain Marvel character virtually from the beginning of that character's run back in the Silver Age, just the weight she feels when it comes to that legacy, and the fact that she wears the mantle on her chest, the star image and symbol, and I really appreciate how they don't jettison that. They strongly connect her to Mar-Vell, but yet she is clearly her own character. And when she goes up in space at the end and she spreads the ashes of her friend who had passed away, that female test pilot, I was moved because they're really setting the stage now for this Captain Marvel to soar. What's the phrase? It's faster, further, higher.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is from this comic. It's not from the movie. I came to the comic it's this comic run first, or maybe the one after that, but and I just love what they're doing with her, and I'm confident that the film is going to obviously its own take, but it's going to follow through with that spirit, essentially. Sorry, Murr, to cut you off there.
No. Go ahead. I was just kind of thinking out loud without using words.
Well, even thinking back to the first issue that we were discussing, Chris, how the Thing, when he meets Monica Rambeau for the first time and says, what's your name, and she says Captain Mar-Vell. And he says, well, he died a few months ago, but I don't think he would mind if you took over the mantle. That says what type of person Mar-Vell was and how generous of a person he was. For the fact that that his friends wouldn't mind if somebody else took over his legacy even then. And for now, years later, for Carol Danvers to be taking it over, somebody who actually knew Mar-Vell, is extra special and unique. And considering the fact that, she also, in a way, got her powers from him, makes it even better.
Yeah, and if anyone, if you going through the history, if anyone deserves the mantle, it's Carol Danvers.
Yes.
And what's wonderful about Carol is that because of the trials and tribulations that creators and editorial have put her through over the decades, she's such a complex and well-realized character. And as I was going through like my really, abridged version of her history prior, it was reminded me of like, my God, how involved this character is and what she's been through. Like I'd forgotten about the alcoholism. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
So, I thought this issue, DeConnick just really did a magnificent job just capturing the essence of what makes Carol Danvers such a compelling character and such a heroic character. So, of the three issues we read, this was far and away my favorite. I mean, I love the Amazing Spider-Man annual, but this is far and away my favorite. I mean, this was masterfully done.
I love that first newspaper page on the first page of the issue with the faux Daily Bugle cover with Ms. Mar-Vell unmasked and exclusive with Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Plus, bid on the old Ms. Mar-Vell costume for a good cause.
Yes. Well, inset being the cover to Ms. Mar-Vell #1.
Yep. with gorgeous Frank Cho art.
And as an aside, for the history buffs out there, if anybody listening has not read The Death of Captain Mar-Vell by Jim Starlin, don't think. Turn this off right now. You can come back to us later. Get that graphic novel. That is still, for me, one of the most moving superhero comics I've ever read. And it really, it's Starlin. It's Jim Starlin writing and drawing. It really goes to the essence of the whole Captain Mar-Vell character and what he stands for, and it's so wonderful. And if you're a Thanos fan, you don't want to miss it either. So, and actually, I'm wondering now, as I think aloud, I wonder if we're going to see Thanos in the film. And are they going to establish that history and connection? That'll be interesting. I don't know. But.
It wouldn't surprise me if we don't see him until the end. Okay. Mind you, I haven't seen it. I know nothing about it. I'm just assuming that if they're going to tie it into the overall Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're going to let her establish herself first. Considering the fact that it's not a spoiler to say this because it was already announced. That this will have some characters that we already know from the Marvel Universe included in them, included here, including Lee Pace returning once again to his role from Guardians of the Galaxy as Ronan the Accuser.
That only makes sense. Absolutely.
Oh, yes, since it's a Kree-centric story.
Exactly. Yeah, so I don't think we're gonna get Thanos in this. If we do get it, it'll be in the final scene of the movie.
Oh yeah, Ian, I agree. I didn't think that they were going to make Thanos a major character in the film.
Right.
Yeah. It just I always go back to the comic history. Captain Mar-Vell is one of Thanos' greatest nemesis.
Sure.
So
yeah,
I'm just wondering if they're gonna touch upon that at all. So,
and I'll bring up, by the way, the Life and Death of Captain Marvel was a CGS Book of the Month Club selection back on May 1st, 2006.
yeah, I get that archivist tingle when Ian.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, that's going all the way back. That might have been one of the very first Book of the Month clubs, or if not first, then somewhat first, because
well, first was Crisis.
Yes,
so we can.
Yeah.
So this was just shortly before I got finished with grad school, moved home, and became a regular member of the cast.
Let's put it this way, Murd. It was early enough in the show's lifespan that there were still minute-by-minute show notes on the
wow
on the page. If you want to know exactly when they whatever happens in this specific episode, go to the Comic Geek Speak website, and you'll have your time markers there appropriately.
Well, two thrilling aspects here. One, more of the secret origin of Adam Murdo, and two, we got to get back to that Book of the Month Club format.
Here.
That was, I always enjoy those thoroughly.
Yes, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm game if you guys are game. We should
we'll talk about that in the future off the air.
Excellent.
So.
Yeah. Couple more thoughts on the
Please.
issue. Like I said, I'm not entirely sold on the art, and I'll have to see if it improves as further issues are there. I also don't know how long Dexter Soy was on this book, because his art style doesn't feel very familiar to me. So I'm assuming he was probably only on it for a couple of issues, and then they switched to a different artist for the rest of Kelly Sue's run. I did read a later run that had a bit of a team involved, where she had a team of heroes helping her out, one of which was Machine Man, which was very reminiscent to Warren Ellis's Next Wave version of the character, which made me very happy, because that was one of my favorite versions of the character outside of Earth X. So that's its own thing there. But yeah, overall, like you said, Chris, it's character building and remembers its past and very much heads towards the future. And the funeral at the end is a very touching moment that also just establishes that this character has a cause and a purpose in her new form.
And not only that, and I'm sure they're going to show us in the film how powerful Captain Marvel is. Like, she is a like cosmic level power in the Marvel universe. And we shouldn't forget that. And they've really taken pains in recent years to show that in the comics, that, she's not some wilting, wallflower, shrinking violet over in the corner. Like, if there's trouble, she's gonna be one of the first people there to deal with it. So yeah, this is great topic. And this comic was really a thrill for me to read, this particular issue.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Hell yeah.
And Murd, over to you.
Well, first of all, I don't think I feel quite as strongly as Chris does that Kelly Sue DeConnick incorporates like all the past personal life beats of Carol Danvers. The alcoholism isn't mentioned. Marcus Immortus certainly isn't mentioned.
Well, they're never going to mention that, Murd.
Yeah, and it's just as well. I mean, I'm certainly not taking her to task for that. My point here is simply that Kelly Sue DeConnick is emphasizing certain, or for grounding certain elements of Danvers' past in her persona and her personal experience above others. And most particularly, we're really getting hit full in the face with her military background, because Kelly Sue DeConnick, we're told, I think by editor Stephen Wacker on the letters page, is she was herself a military brat. And so that's kind of her handle on the character. It's what she wanted to emphasize. I think she said elsewhere that she considered her take on Carol Danvers as kind of like the Chuck Yeager of the Marvel Universe. So we're really getting a much more stronger emphasis on Carol Danvers as ex-Air Force here than we've seen recently or possibly ever before. And so in a way, she's almost like we're being introduced to a completely new character here. It's sort of a deviation from what had been done with Carol Danvers as a character most recently. And even here, at the conclusion of the fight with Absorbing Man at the start of the book, after Creel has been taken down, a reporter on the spot comes up to Captain America and asks him, "And what can you tell us about your new ally?" Because apparently, mainly the new costume, but perhaps also a new attitude. Sort of the Deconic's approach to the character filtering its way through into the awareness of the characters in the story. Yep. Carol Danvers is coming off to the casual bystander as a completely different person. So it's in a way, it's kind of fitting that we talk about this as, in a sense, the first appearance of Carol Danvers as Captain Mar-Vell, because this is not the same Carol Danvers we've seen in the past for whatever reason, primarily extra-textually because Kelly Sue DeConnick is now writing her. She has taken on kind of an entirely new aspect. And it is that emphasis on the military. I'm going to use that as kind of a springboard for the whole discussion of legacy here. I like you guys, I enjoyed the discussion between Cap and Carol back at Avengers Tower after the battle is over, where he's trying to talk her into assuming the name of Captain Mar-Vell. Mm-hmm. I think he does a pretty good job of convincing her, just appealing to her background as Air Force by daring her is pretty clever of him. Just his knowledge of the different branches of armed services and their little cultural peculiarities. He could have had an easier time of it, though, if he had avoided using terms like mantle and legacy and approached the role of Captain Mar-Vell more in terms of rank and title. And Danvers being ex-military, she would have responded to that even more strongly, I think. Just, Mar-Vell's name wasn't Captain Mar-Vell. Well, yes, his name was Mar-Vell. Captain Mar-Vell was his rank as an officer. She could think of Mar-Vell as not only a dear friend and a good man and a real hero, but also as her superior officer in the field of heroism. And he died an honorable death, and that leaves his office vacant. And she has the authority to give herself a field promotion to this office that she clearly deserves. And so she's kind of doing herself a disservice and committing a dereliction of duty, you might even argue, in having not assumed this title for herself years ago. So that's something that Cap probably could have done and gotten Carol to go along with his point a little even more readily than she ultimately does.
Good point.
And then eventually we get that great single-page splash of her thinking to herself while soaring through space, "I'm taking the damn name."
Yeah,
powerful moment. Very, very often reproduced on the internet right now, I'm suspecting. I like the overall structure of the issue. I like the fact that we get this front-loaded superhero fight scene action between Cap and Absorbing Man. Get that out of the way. Give the action lovers something to chew on. And it's almost like this first issue is divided into two different stories. So it's like we get that climactic moment when she says to herself, "I'm taking the damn name." And that's kind of like the superhero portion of the story ends. And then we get the rest of the issue focusing on Carol Danvers as a person, learning a little bit more about her past, her idolization of the pilot Helen Cobb, her first meeting with her in the company of her deceased older brother Steve, and then discovering that on the very same front page of the Daily Bugle where her assumption of the name Captain Mar-Vell is announced to the public, we also get, ironically, as a little sidebar to that, a notice of the death of Helen Cobb in a flying accident. And then we get this lovely little sequence with Helen Cobb's first-person narration of the first meeting between her and Carol years ago, and then Carol using her Captain Mar-Vell powers to fly Helen Cobb's ashes out into outer space and releasing them out there. Just fraught with symbolism, legacy, personal heroes. So it's a story that it's an issue that works on a couple of levels and tells a couple of different stories and gives us a couple of different insights into the person that Kelly Sue DeConnick is forging Carol Danvers into in this new series that she started writing in 2012.
It's a good point, Murd, that it does feel like two separate issues. Like rather than the next morning, I almost feel like they should have just put epilogue as the next header title after her moment in space, because it is very much the end of that specific part of the story, and then something very, very different to follow.
Well, even to take it a step further, instead of epilogue, they could have just started and treated it like a co-feature, to borrow a term from a euphemism from DC a couple of years ago. I mean, it's basically a full half of the issue is given over to her interactions with her old supporting character Tracy Burke, who is dying of cancer, and also to her reminiscences of Helen Cobb.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah, and I'm definitely coming down on the bad side of the art here. I give you credit for giving Dexter Soy a fair shake here, Ian, by saying that you feel kind of ambivalent about the art. Myself, I think it just looks like ninth grade art class studies in watercolor, and I don't like it at all.
The very last page is probably the best page in the entire book, with her heading off in the mask. Like that's,
I love that. I love that.
Oh, yep,
page.
I'll agree with you there.
Yeah, but the rest, I can certainly feel what you're talking about there, Murd. Yeah, it's a little bit rough, and yet again, even moments like what I was talking about with Ed Benes, there's even some moments yet again of like eyes not being where they should be and stuff like that. That for some reason I'm always drawn to the eyes on characters. Like if they're not properly spaced, it just makes them feel like they have dead eyes, and there's multiple instances of that throughout this issue.
It's very important for. When you're creating simulations of the human face, if it's going to be identifiable and it's not going to slip into the uncanny valley. Yes, the alignment of the eyes is, without a doubt, very important. It's what Jim Henson used to call the magic triangle. When placing the eyes on the Muppets that he and his cohorts were building. He had to make sure that they were at exactly the right spacing, or otherwise the Muppet would look like it was gazing in two different directions, and it would just look weird.
Words of wisdom from the master.
It's an important thing you've picked up on there, Ian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I will second the praise for Jamie McKelvey's costume design. It definitely it looks like a military uniform, part military dress uniform and part like space jumpsuit. And the inclusion of the sash is a nice nod to her past as Ms. Marvel.
Yes.
Plus, as we see in this issue, in the fight scene, it's also functional.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, it could have easily just been an accessory, but instead, it's useful.
Right. Yeah. I must confess, I am not a fan of the faux hawk, but that is an element of the new design that didn't last. So, no harm done.
Yeah, I'm looking. I know that there was an interview with Jamie McKelvey at some point where he was discussing the actual creation of it, and I did find the Newsarama article from 2012, which goes into a little bit of depth. He said, when asked about the costume, he said, I wouldn't necessarily say practical, but that's a result of us trying to create something that came out of her character and background in the military. So you did indeed get that right there, Murd. McKelvey himself making that point. I think the best and strongest costumes arise from the character's personality, backstory, and so on. It deserves a much longer answer, but I'd like to see more consideration for what message a female character's design is putting across. I think we as an industry are getting better at it, though, which is heartening. Hear to that.
Yes, indeed. Words of wisdom from the designer.
Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely agree with his point there that should be informed by the past.
Gentlemen, I apologize. I have to go. I have a family issue that just popped up.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem, sir. We were approaching wrapping up anyway, so have a good rest of your night and hope all goes well.
You too, brothers. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Okay.
Excelsior, Chris.
Excelsior. Bye-bye.
Well, the sudden exit, nonetheless. I was gonna say, Murd, this was around a time where Marvel was redesigning a lot of their female characters' costumes. I remember Psylocke in particular had a redesign right around then that distanced herself away from her swimsuit. And Storm also, I remember, had a very striking redesign that stuck around for a decent amount of time after that, where it sort of brought her back to her regal roots a little bit, while at the same time also looking incredibly badass, while also returning her to the Mohawk, which is, in my opinion, the best design for Storm. She's the one who can rock a mohawk versus Captain Marvel.
And what did Betsy Braddock's redesign look like?
Betsy Braddock's was a full body suit for one thing. It was mostly black, if I'm remembering it correctly. I'm gonna bring up an image of it right now, see if I can find it off the top here. But if I'm remembering right, it was originally supposed to just be her X-Force outfit, and then it wound up becoming what she was mostly found in afterwards. It was mostly dark with a little bit of silver in there with an X on it, and very much full body, which I can appreciate because for years there she was eye candy more than anything else, and then they went and tried to distance her from that a little bit and make her a little bit more ninja. I think that might have been Chris Anka's redesign, if I'm remembering it correctly, because he did a lot of the X-Men back then.
Well, good news. I mean, it's really only practical to have, in combat situations, to have as much of your body covered and protected as possible.
Clearly, yeah, which I think Carol very much, achieved, and also it's a lot better when you're flying through space when all of your skin is covered.
Right. I mean, it's not like there's going to be any friction out there in an airless environment, but you never know when you're going to run into microscopic space rocks or something.
Right. Plus, I don't know how susceptible she is to freezing cold.
Distinct, well, probably less so than the average human being, but
one would assume.
Which is another thing because she's not the average human being, and that's something that I don't think had been conceived of yet at this point. And it's something that's going to figure pretty strongly in the movie. Her mixed heritage.
Yes, that's a very recent development in the comics too. I haven't read the issues in question, but I know, God, it's either her father or her mother. I think it was her.
It's her mother.
Mother.
I'm positive of that. I actually verified it.
Okay, great. Yeah,
it is her mother.
All right. Was her mother taking refuge on Earth, or any idea?
I think it's another one of those crash landed on Earth, rescued by a human bystander, and then ends up marrying him kind of situations. It is somewhat similar to the Aquaman origin.
Happens all the time. I mean, I know so many people who have parentage that way.
Yeah, right.
At least 7 of them on my block.
Wow. Brooklyn's an interesting place.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. New York in general. So many superheroes, so little time.
So many alien half-breeds, too, apparently.
Yep. All right, I think that's pretty much all I have on this particular issue. If you have anything else, Murd, you want to shoot out there?
No, I think we've covered everything I had in mind to mention also.
Excellent. So before we wrap up, since this episode will be out just in time, you want to give the listeners a quick reminder on where to submit their best ofs.
Oh, absolutely. If you'd like to vote in our CTS Best of 2018 awards, well, first visit thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com to find a complete listing of all the nominees in all 16 categories. And you'll also find some voting instructions there. Then put together your votes and email them in to bestof@comicgeekspeak.com. And you will have just about 3 days, just give or take a few hours, to get those votes in before the deadline, which will be this coming Sunday, March 10th, at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Very good, very good. And we'll be including that on a not-too-distant future episode of the show. Mm-hmm. All righty. Anything else, or are we good to wrap up?
I think we are good to go here.
We have shot our bolts.
Yes, we have.
All right. Sing us a song, Murd.
Hey, I'm the piano man. If you'd like to send us an email, you can send it to comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave a voicemail, you can call 267-702-6642. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is @comicgeekspeak. You can visit the aforementioned thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com. to not only find out how to vote for your favorites in the Best of 2018 awards, but also to leave feedback on this and many other episodes of our podcast, and just to shoot the breeze with your fellow CGS listeners and friends on various geeky topics. We'd like to thank everyone who has donated monetarily to the show in the past. We really appreciate it. The show would not be what it is today without your help. And we are, as always, uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
Shazam! Wait, wrong Captain Marvel.
Dope.